Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm Kathryn Musseau. This is a story that delves into writing books and helping you gain ideas and insight into how you might do that yourself. And we're going to have a lot of fun today because besides Let's Get Writing, it's going to be Let's Get Knitting. Look at these super cool gloves that I'm told are 5-fingered mittens in some parts of Newfoundland. There's a story to that we're going to find out as we meet my guests, who today are Christine LeGrow.
Hi.
Hi, Christine.
Hi, Kathryn.
And Shirley Scott.
Hello.
This is very different, looking at guests who are actually knitting. You've thrown me off my game, ladies.
Well,
I feel like I should be doing
don't
something.
look to see if it's right. But we're knitting.
Oh, I mean, it's wonderful, and everyone can see, well, they can see these very, very cool mitts I have on, which reminded me of Sesame Street or something. They're just so, I don't know, fun. I guess fun is the word. They're really fun. And on the table, because due to the heat, I am going to take them off. But on the table here, we have such a wonderful selection of work, and I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit about some of these mittens, but the reason why we are here is even more than that. It's the book, which is on display there, and I have a copy here, called From the Island of Newfoundland, Saltwater Mittens, more than 20 heritage designs to knit. And it's so cool. You have the clothesline across the front with some of the designs, and here you are working away at the table. And I really do feel like I should be doing it too, but I'm not. So tell me, what is going on? I mean, how did you get started on this path to write a book about mittens, heritage mittens, I should say?
Well, Shirley and I met maybe almost 15 years ago, 12 years
Nearly,
ago,
I think,
maybe.
Yeah.
And Shirley had traveled the world and studied knitting cultures, and I was in awe of her life as a traveling knitter. And I had lived in Newfoundland ever since I was born, and I had a knitting company, and all my life was consumed with knitting, and I realized Shirley's was also, and we became fast friends shortly
Amazing.
after.
Yeah.
Yes, it happened instantly. I was also in awe of her life because she was, I actually said, that woman is leading my fantasy life because she has a hand knitting business. Everything's knit in Newfoundland. She puts real money in the hands of Newfoundland women and sells a tremendous amount of it, and it's all beautiful. I would have liked to have done that, but I never did.
Well, you were busy traveling the world,
Yes, I was
exploring
busy traveling the world.
knitting cultures and
then
so on.
we had realized, we both knew that not a lot of people were knitting trigger mitts and traditional Newfoundland knitting, and my business is based on traditional knitting. And Shirley had been collecting Newfoundland mittens, and we had both had a conversation about, gee, nobody really wrote that down in a modern printed form.
Right.
It had skipped a generation. It had gone right to Ravelry and online and virtual knitting patterns, kind of. And we didn't even know each other at the time, but we were both kind of, somebody needs to write this down and get it in a
Right.
modern printed form.
And
that's
I've
what
met
drew you
people who
together.
said I'd always loved to have made them, but there was nothing to follow, and I never asked Mom when she was alive, and
Yeah.
things like that. So we knew it had to get written down in a way that people could knit from the written word.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting because I had mentioned to you when I was growing up, my mother was always knitting mittens or socks. I don't know what happened. Anyway, I'm that generation that it skipped.
Yeah.
Enough said
There
on that.
was
I
a
guess
generation
there
that
was
got
a
skipped.
generation.
Yeah.
And I guess we got into different things because
Yes.
the world sort of opened up, and so things that you might do, which I think is sad
And
because
you could buy everything.
and we could buy things because when our parents grew up, things weren't so readily available. And,
That's right.
And even when you could buy things, they still preferred to make them many times.
That's true.
Yeah, they
That's
did.
true. There's something healthy about making something with your hands.
Yeah.
It's good for your
And there's
mental
no comparison
physical.
in mittens between
What you
real
buy
ones
and-
like this
Yeah.
and what you would buy.
Okay, so now that you've said that, just tell me, what are the differences?
Well, especially in Newfoundland, you're using 2 balls of yarn and 2 colors, so they're sometimes called double knit. And they are very, very warm,
Very
for sure.
warm.
You will never, you might see a mitten with a pattern in it. It'll never be thick and warm like this.
That's
They're
right.
very, very strong. They last for an awful long time.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, with a store-bought mitten, you'll be reaching for your keys twice, and that's the finger or the thumb out of it. And they're just much better quality.
And when you say double knit, so that is it a tighter weave as well, or just the fact that you're
yeah.
using the? Because when you pick it up and you feel it, it
Yes.
almost
Acts like thermal underwear.
Okay.
There's
Yep.
a piece
Yeah.
of wool traveling behind. You'll notice that we're only knitting with one piece. This stitch I just knit is the light color one.
Okay.
Now this one I'm going to knit the dark color one. So there's only one piece of wool getting knit at a time, which causes the other to travel loosely. So it's like a air cushion effect, like a thermal
Or
underwear.
a lining. Sort
It's
of.
almost
Yeah.
like a lining, but it's interwoven and it traps the heat of your hands and it lets your hands breathe but not get cold.
Interesting.
These are very good in
Yeah.
our weather. Very good.
And so they are done with wool as well.
Yeah.
And wool is the
Do you
best
use
thing.
you can use acrylic, but
People
wool is
do,
the tradition,
but
I would think.
wool will keep your hands warm.
Mm-hmm.
Acrylic will make your hands sweat. It doesn't breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about a lot of products. though.
Yes.
About a lot of products that way. I do prefer the natural fibers.
yes.
So
much
these
better.
mittens have real integrity.
Yeah.
And they've been knit here for generations, many generations, I think. We can make a case for the fact that they came directly from England.
And you can.
Yes,
yeah,
we
because
can.
actually in your book
Because
you
they're
make
not-
these references.
They're not made in other places just like they are here. And we know the ones that they made in Britain and what was similar about them. So it has to have come. Also, they were made everywhere on the island of Newfoundland, which did not have tremendous communications in the old days. And yet, everywhere around the island, they knew this one way. So they didn't
You
learn
knew
it.
shipping was the link.
Yes,
Yeah.
they had to have learned it at home and brought it with them and passed it down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the thing about these mittens too is I understand the more you wash them, the more you wear them, the
The
better,
better
they get.
Yeah.
Yes, of
So
course,
it's
I always
true.
say if you're washing your mittens, you're not living right. But you
Okay,
know,
that's another chapter. Sometimes you take for example, I mean, people would use these when they were fishing.
That's
and
right. They would be soaking
outdoor-
wet. They would use
yeah.
them when they're fishing.
Yeah.
You know, if you're jigging a cod.
Yeah.
You know,
and
that's
drying
where the
behind
trigger
the
net come in.
stove and all of that.
Yeah.
Now, this may be a weird question, but I have to ask it because it's in my mind. But would you ever use lanolin or anything on these mittens to make them waterproof?
Well, in days gone by, when Newfoundlanders had a sheep, they sheared the sheep. They cleaned the wool, they picked the wool, and then they carded it and spun it. A lot of times they did not wash the wool because that took a lot of the lanolin out. When you washed it, it left a little bit in, but lanolin made it waterproof anyway. And
They were.
they were.
And that is
Yeah.
that smell off the sheep wool that you smell these, you go, oh wow, you can smell the sheep off that. It's not the sheep, it's the lanolin that's still in the wool, and it's water repellent, but it breathes.
These are still very water resistant.
Are they?
though. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to be really dunked to get really wet.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe we'll test that later.
There's a story in the book about Michael Flaherty's mittens.
Yeah.
And you'll notice they bobbed out to sea and did not sink and then came back on a different beach a couple days later.
Seriously.
As
Yes.
a pair.
okay,
It is a
okay.
true story. So you know there was a quality in the material that they just didn't sink to the bottom, they floated. Yeah.
Excellent.
They would have, or they would have been
Well,
down there,
Yeah.
food for the fishes.
You know, I like your storytelling aspects and the little anecdotes that are in here. But you said there was a story, I think, about these mittens.
Oh, there
that-
is.
Yeah, I want to know. 'cause
I mean, I call those gloves.
Okay,
You know,
yeah,
I
I
worked in
did
a
too.
retail world a long time, and you ordered in the leather gloves in time for
Right.
Christmas and Mother's Day. And I spent all my life at craft fairs. And a few years back, a lady came to me and she said, "Do you have any 5-finger mittens?" And I looked all around my table and I said, "Do you mean gloves?" And she said, No, 5-finger mittens. You know, the ones from Newfoundland with the fancy patterns and the diamonds. You know, 5-finger mittens. It's got a thumb, a finger, and the other 3 fingers. I went, yes, I have plenty of those. And she bought a couple of pairs.
She didn't know the word glove.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And she even demonstrated, you know, thumb, finger, and the other 3 fingers.
And that's this one here you're talking about too.
Well,
That's
like
a
the-
trigger
now
mitt.
That's
a
the trigger.
mitt.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So called
Yes.
because what, you can use it to shoot a gun?
Oh, originally, probably
Yeah.
if they were going out to shoot seabirds and stuff like
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
for many more things. All your outdoor work, if you had to drive a nail, if you had to put bait on something, made your whole life a lot easier.
A whole lot
right.
easier. Those are the ones.
Today, it's like to put your money in the parking meter or your pass. Or
There you go. Hey, we do
Unlock
that
the
with an app.
storage unit.
Yeah.
That's right.
But
That's right.
they're definitely, until you start to wear them, you can't think how useful they'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those were the ones that my father had, were the,
Yes.
the trigger mittens, and Mom made gray ones. And the pattern, I think, as I look through here, was kind of that.
Diamond.
I bet it
Kind
was
of-
this one.
Let's see.
This
Yes,
one in
it
the
would be
top
labor-
left-hand corner up there.
Yes.
Was
That
it
The
there?
one?
basic one.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. It had.
It's not on this
oh.
table, but
Yes.
we've done
Oh,
it
okay.
previously.
Similar to that. And they were always around, around the house and so on. And, you know, they're just so beautiful. And I think, how did you figure out the patterns? Because you're saying they were not written down.
We looked at them a
then
long
we-
time.
Was there any wine involved in this?
Oh, no, not at all.
No,
Well,
you probably
Christine didn't have any.
It was a lot of,
A lot of tea.
a lot
graph
of tea.
paper and pencils
Graph paper
and
and
counting
pencil.
stitches, and then working out the chart of the pattern into the stitch count, because Shirley and I have been knitting for more than a half a century each, you know, so
okay.
we knew how many stitches to put in a mitten if you wanted to
Yeah,
incorporate,
to
say,
get the
21
size and-
stitches or 25 stitches. So the patterns we wrote from scratch, and the charts, so we knew the interesting designs that people put in their patterns. We counted them, and then it turned into a Excel spreadsheet and everything eventually. But it started off
That was as good as we
graph
could get.
paper and pencils, and
Yeah.
it took a long time.
Yes, we had to struggle a lot with technology, and we're not
Yeah.
there yet, but we do our best.
Look,
But I should
you have the
mention that many of these patterns used to be made in Newfoundland in the old days. We didn't think them up out of our heads. We had samples of them. This was actually a pair of vamps when I saw it. It's called Signal Hill, by the way we gave them the names.
Yes.
They
Signal
didn't have
Hill.
them in
Have
the
this one
past.
right here.
This
Yes.
one's
Hold that
called
up again.
Signal Hill.
Think-
Yeah, we think you can see dots and dashes in it. There were no drugs involved either in doing this.
You know, it's
Here, I'm
like
gonna just-
Marconi's
that's the one we're
Morse
talking
code.
about there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
But
yeah.
they were not, it got down so only one kind of diamond was being made and sold. And that really worried us, that all these had been lost, and
that
many,
was this
many
one.
more patterns.
This one was the one you would see in craft stores, and it's the one that my knitters and I knit most often. But there were so many different patterns that Shirley had collected over the years, and that we had knit at Spindrift over the years, that we went, okay, there are less and less varieties. There are pockets of towns and bays where 3 or 4 people knitted specific patterns. So they would say, no, they're not really not disappearing, but generally speaking, the variety was shrinking a great deal.
Yeah.
And the other thing, perhaps you could actually, would you identify geographic areas by mittens? Could I
We
go
would
Oh,
love
for
to,
sure.
but
Yeah?
No,
it's
that
not,
part is-
it's pretty hard though.
Is it?
Because
Yeah.
things were passed around,
Yes.
but
And
we
it-
do know some.
Yeah.
Yes.
For example, this one over here, which Shirley named Hang Ashore, and we
This one here?
Yep, and Shirley
Hang
did it to
Ashore?
match Cape Bonavista. That's called St. Mary's Bay Diamond in St. Mary's Bay sometimes. And then the little children's one right here, that's a trigger mitt in front of the big blue and white one. That's the other variety in a large men's mitten. It's repeated 4 by 4 times. That's St. Mary's Bay Diamond also, but it's completely different than this one.
And
So-
I didn't know that was a St. Mary's Bay diamond. I saw it on a guy on the news on TV.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
And
yeah.
quickly memorized the pattern.
Okay, you're impressing me.
Yeah,
I want to play cards with you on my team.
And of course, you know how a lot of people did crazy quilts and patchwork quilts.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of people who quilt and sew by hand, they would have been knitters as well. So this, even though Shirley named it Spring Ice, in a quilt pattern, some people call that tumbling blocks. And the Fogo Island 9 patch down here in the middle that's really bright in the mitten, even though I call that Fogo Island 9 patch,
This one here?
Yes.
yes, that was based off like crazy quilts you'd see on a clothesline called double Irish chain, which is also a knitting pattern, you know? So we just adapted it to what we wanted to do.
And you name all the
Yes,
different-
that's
They
the
all
most
have
fun.
names, yes.
We made
I
up the
imagine.
names,
Yeah.
and
Made up
they're
the
a
names.
lot of
Delightful.
fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of course in every town people made up names
Yeah.
anyway. Like there's no actual written documentation of the
No,
real
that
name of
name, no.
anything. You know, it's somebody in St. Mary's Bay knit those and said,
But we do laugh
Yeah.
hearing mainlanders say, "Oh, I'm knitting hang ashore," and they're living in, I don't know, Sudbury or
Hey,
somewhere.
well, you would know. We were kicking around those
We think
parts
that's
for a
really
lot of
kinda
years.
cute.
Yeah.
that's right.
So you have your own business, directly Spindrift or
Spindrift.
Spindrift?
Yes,
Excuse me.
yes, Spindrift
yeah,
Hand knits.
Yeah. And
for a
so
long time.
do you have knitters working for you?
Yes, in rural parts of Newfoundland. Yes.
Interesting.
And,
Yeah.
started that probably when I was 20 years old. It just had a different name back then. Yeah.
Amazing. So now you have many, many little stories in here. One thing I really did like caught my attention. It said, I was late in life learning to knit. I thought, okay, this is good. This is good.
This is going to inspire you to
This
pick
is,
up the
and I go,
needles.
I was 8 years old before I could knit.
Yep.
Okay, that's late in life. All right,
Yeah,
very good.
That's right.
But I
Oh,
mean,
it was
it's,
true. They learned, in England, they learned at 4 years old in school. I'm sure a lot of people in the early days learned at 4 or 5 years
Oh,
old.
definitely.
Yeah.
I thought I was late learning to knit, and I was 6 years old
Yes,
when
and I
learned,
was 7.
You know?
A lot
Yeah.
of kids learn
Yeah.
around
late
that
to it,
age.
ladies.
I had to learn for brownies, I think, or something
Oh, you
like
had to.
that.
Yeah.
Your
Although
knitter's
they
badge.
were all doing it all the time, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I did knit an Afghan. I'm gonna fess up, but it was
Oh.
Yeah.
nothing complicated, and it had all straight lines.
On it.
You know, I would never look at a mitten and think that I was ever going to do that.
Oh, you
but,
could. We
but
teach
I'm-
people.
Yeah.
Follow one step at a time and not panic, because these are done purposely bright and
Yes.
you know, bright
Uh-huh.
patterns, and they're all varied. But this is 3 dark stitches, you know. So if you just knit the 3 dark stitches, it tells you to knit, and then you knit the 3 light stitches, and you go one step at a time.
Yeah, and
it
it's-
really works out okay.
They're not easy.
Oh no,
I
they're
should
not
say,
easy.
yeah.
It's not like knitting
For
a
a
garter stitch
beginning
scarf.
knitter will have a struggle with this,
Yes.
and it is kind of hard for us to tell that to people, but you do have to have a bit of experience to do them from instructions in a book.
Yeah.
Well, I
But,
won't start with that.
We don't want to discourage anyone from trying, but if you find it difficult, you're normal. They were very advanced form of knitting. That's what I found so interesting. If you just came here and were freezing to death, you'd knock something up pretty quick.
Yeah.
It would not be something nice like this or twice as thick as these are.
That's right.
You know, so we know that there was care put into them from the very beginning.
And,
so.
and it's so nice that you've done this so that it hasn't disappeared, that it means so many traditional
Well,
patterns.
I was a
here.
librarian before I was hove off, as we say.
Hova.
And I like the book.
Retired.
Beautiful,
We had a
beautiful.
grand time making it.
Now, so
Lots of
tell
fun.
me about how it came about that you were going to do a book. You had all the ideas and patterns, and
So we started off easy, and we started doing one pattern. We said, well, let's try a little pack of patterns, keep it simple, do one at a time, and just test the water, you know, because just diving in and writing a book was very overwhelming
were
to the
very
two of us.
afraid.
We were very,
and
very
many
afraid.
people.
And we only had little old computers, 20 years old. And
Yeah, yeah.
So we started having bi-weekly meetings, and we decided which patterns we would do. And we made a package of pattern cards first, and we started selling those. And they were a hit. So then we made a second package of pattern cards the following year. And then they did really well, and then we made a third. So then we felt we were ready. That's when we approached Gavin and said, gee, our pattern cards are selling really great, and we've got lots of material for a book. And he said, okay, I'll publish it.
There you go. And Gavin would be Gavin
Gavin
of Boulder
Will
Books.
of Boulder Books.
And Amanda Will.
And
Yes.
Amanda
Amanda
Will
Will.
of
Yeah,
Boulder Books.
of Boulder
yes.
Books.
And Gavin, who probably didn't know if knitting was fit to eat, said yes.
He took a great big leap of faith with the two of us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he did.
and let's just say he made great judgment. Boulder Books are in Portugal Cove in St. Philip's, and so far, ladies, how many of these books have sold?
Well, they're in print. There's been 20,000 printed, and we know at least 10,000 of them have been sold before the next 10,000 got printed. And the first printing was the 1st of October last fall.
Last
Yeah.
fall.
Yes, it's a
So
big
it's-
surprise to everybody in the book industry.
Yeah,
Every
it's kinda
knitter, to
funny.
ourselves, we're just like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it there's a message in that. People
Yes,
are
what is the
wanting
message?
this.
Yeah.
We don't
They're-
know.
No, the message is that I think maybe people want to turn off the technology.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm thinking maybe they want to turn off the technology and do something tactile besides play.
I guess it's
games.
very
Yes.
real.
You
That's
know,
right.
it's in your hands.
Yes,
you can
it's
feel it,
very
That's right.
real.
and you can. I think it's very satisfying to make something
Yes.
and see it come together.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the younger generation now are called the maker generation. They want to make things with their hands again. So a lot
They
of
think
young
this
knitters.
is cool.
Yeah, it's cool again to be knitting,
Yeah.
and they like knitting with hand-dyed yarns, and they like trying spinning yarns. You know, so we've tapped into the marketplace just at the right
We
time.
think the timing, which
And books are
we had
cool.
nothing to do with the timing, except do it whenever we could do it, but seems to have been very good
Yeah,
for
the
some
timing
reason.
was good.
Yeah.
And Boulder has a really good distribution system, and they have a really good network with
Yeah,
different
so it goes everywhere.
different book selling places. So
Sold in Europe,
Sold in
sold in
Europe.
the States.
Yeah.
My sister
Yeah,
bought her
you know.
copy on Broadway in New York City.
yeah.
Hey, we're taking over Broadway here
Yes.
in Newfoundland.
Oh
Let
yes,
us not.
there is that effect.
Yeah,
We sometimes
yeah.
wonder if it's all involved.
What an idea.
Yeah.
Why don't you do a come from away mitten?
Oh, well, in
Wow.
our second book, the
In
dedication
your second book? Or?
is not
Yeah.
a come from away mitten, but there'll be a little
Yeah,
connection.
I'm from
maybe.
away, so
Yeah, you're a CFA, and you're here now living
I'm
now.
here now for quite a while.
Yeah, you figured
It's
out where to
hometown
go.
now.
It's home.
And you know, there are so many Newfoundlanders that had children that moved away, and then
Yeah.
they saw this book and they don't even know how to knit, but they picked it up and went, "Oh, it's Newfoundland," and
Yes.
I'm so homesick.
And the pictures,
And
I think.
you know, they just latched onto it like a baby does to a pacifier or something. You know, so we get emails every day, don't we, Shirley,
every
from
day.
people that go, "I got your book, and it reminds me of home," or they tell the story of their
I
grandmother,
used to
or
live on
wherever
the Northern Peninsula. I
Yes.
used to live here.
in
and
Lawn,
there.
or I
Yeah.
used to live in Buckins, or
Yes,
you know, my
everyone-
grandmother was from Twillingate, and they pour out their hearts
Yeah.
to us. They
Oh,
really
some
do.
are very long.
Really?
They're-
Yes, they want to talk
They're
about that as
beautiful.
much as anything.
Yeah, so it's made a connection to them personally for some reason.
Yeah.
It links them to the past, to their roots.
And I think there's something true to be said in that, because when you think of our roots, we all want to have that sense of belonging
Being grounded.
somewhere. And
Yeah.
and I know when I see a pair of your mittens or your five-fingered mittens, or but the trigger ones, it makes me think about growing up.
Yes.
My father
Yes.
and different things. And
They're an icon of Newfoundland
They
culture.
are.
Yeah, they're like a
Yeah.
whale tail or an iceberg. It makes
well,
you think
I kind of
purity
want
jam.
to show a few pictures here if we can pull in on this.
Many
if we can-
pictures in our book.
Yeah, many, and I'm trying to get it. And if you can see here, there's the iceberg, and then you have mittens and a plate there. And let's see,
Some of them
it's
are
a
named
work
after
of-
icebergs. Well, we name a lot of mittens after weather.
Look at this. This is gorgeous, and as well you should, because we're so good at creating
Yes.
weather.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have our own weather patterns, and look at that, just set
So
against.
that was
rocks.
because
Beautiful.
it's the tumbling blocks pattern. But one year that we were icebound, the harbor in St. John's, just a couple of years
Yeah,
ago.
it was only a
And I
couple
thought
years
that's
ago.
what it looked like. So they're called spring ice mittens.
right.
Well, even if you don't knit, there's absolutely nothing that you wouldn't love about. Look
Thank
at this.
you for saying that. We
Look
hoped.
at this. Look at this one.
That's
Just pull-
Patty Barry, a native Newfoundlander who lives
There
on
we
Fogo
go. There we go.
Island,
Yeah.
and he's
There.
brewing
This
up
way.
salt cod fish cakes
As you
I
would.
think he's got
Yeah, you
beans
got
in the
tea
other
in
pot.
that.
And there's
Bucket
tea
of
bags
tea.
brewing in that, what used to be an apple juice can. And he's having a boil up.
Well,
And how
yeah.
many have asked for the fish cake recipe? I mean,
Well,
really.
now you're going to have to combine it. But
This is a knitting book.
But when you think about
Yeah.
it, when you look at the mittens, there's an immediate connection to home, and I want to do that. I want to be outdoors in the fresh air.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
You
want
can
Whether
to
we
smell-
get there or not,
Yeah,
we
you can
want to.
smell that fire burning, and you
Yeah.
can feel the freshness of
Because
the
I got to
air.
get one of
Sure,
these for my
everyone does.
husband.
We're doing that every day here, you know.
Yeah, we do it. I go
We
a
do
lot
do it.
into the woods on a side by side, and so I don't have the mittens, but
Yeah.
I may fix that today.
Yes.
But you go in and you do these things, and they're feel good things, and I think
Yeah.
part of our, again, it's that desire within us to get back to something simple.
That's right.
And turn things off
Yeah.
because it's a constant. Things are coming at
is.
us. And I remember times when
bombarded
I'm
with
bombarded.
everything.
When
Yeah.
I do things with my hands and so on, it does feel good.
It
Yeah.
does.
It
It,
does
it
feel
does
like an
quiet
oasis.
you,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
It is meditative
It's very,
for sure.
very calming.
When if you're not cursing and swearing, when you're
Yeah, if you
getting
make a
caught up in
mistake.
it, but,
Yeah, if you
but it
make a
is very
mistake.
focusing.
Beautiful. I'm just so glad that you were on your world tour. Which you were. You were on Cheerio and Grand
Yes,
Falls,
and
Windsor,
Grand Falls,
Newfoundland.
I tell you, all in the
Yeah.
same week. Well, within the space of
Well,
a
there
week.
you
Yeah.
go.
It
Well,
was
I'm,
great.
the fact that you fit us into your world tour and you answered my question that kept me up last night. How do they do the fingers?
Yeah.
And you did tell me that. We're not going to tell the viewers because we want them to buy the book. And
Yes.
And if
Right.
they're buying this book, they may well know how to do it. But if they're
Right.
like me, there's a technique and it makes sense and
Yes.
it just works beautifully. So there is going to be a second book. You did say that.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
It's called Saltwater Classics from the island of
knit.
Newfoundland. Yeah, to knit.
Saltwater Classic.
And this time we're going to have the debate about vamps. And a lot of the people who watch your program today, they'll go, "Oh, I know what vamps are," but there
It's
are
a
different.
hot topic.
Yeah, the definition of vamps,
Of
and we're going to have
vamps.
caps and more mittens too.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Well, this has been just a delight to sit down and not knit with you. And I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for coming in to
Thank
be
you
part
very
of
much.
Let's Get
you.
Writing.
Thanks so much for inviting us.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
it was
most welcome.
great.
And I want you back again.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.